qualified immunity ban allows citizens to bring individual lawsuits against Colorado police officers for alleged civil rights violations.
This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Every job has its perks, its special privileges, if you will. For this job, it's a virtually unlimited supply of Keurig coffee pods. For someone working in a kitchen, it's free food. For somebody working in retail, it's discounts. But for police officers, the most notable special privilege these days is what's called qualified immunity, meaning legal protection from lawsuits for anything an officer did in the line of duty. This idea of qualified immunity actually has its roots in the civil rights era of the 1960s. In 1961, a group of white and black priests went to grab lunch at a whites-only bus terminal in Jackson, Mississippi. The priests were arrested and sentenced to 4 months jail time. Now, the charges against them were eventually dropped, and the priests sued the police for unlawful arrest. That case, Pearson v. Ray, made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and in 1967, the court handed down a ruling that not only protected police in that case, but in many more cases to come. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote a majority opinion arguing that officers shouldn't be held liable if they acted in good faith and with probable cause in making an arrest. And let's just say proving intent is legally a super tough thing to do. Maybe that's why charges against police are so rare. In fact, almost 99% of police killings from 2013 to 2020 have not resulted in officers being charged with a crime. To change this is where the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act comes in. It was passed by the House in March, but has yet to pass the Senate. The bill would lower the criminal intent standard, limit qualified immunity, grant subpoena power to the DOJ, help to prevent racial profiling, and restrict practices like no-knock warrants and chokeholds.
A profession where you have the power to kill should be a profession that requires highly trained officers who are accountable to the public. That is what this bill accomplishes.
Critics of the bill say this will cause officers to hesitate in the line of duty over concerns of being sued. Qualified immunity, which Democrats and Republicans cannot seem to agree on, is part of what's causing the holdup of this bill in the Senate. Some states and local governments have passed qualified immunity reforms, like New Mexico and New York City. Newsy's Jamal Andrus tells us more about the first state to pass this legislation, Colorado.
From the beginning of negotiations to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, a major sticking point has been qualified immunity, the broad legal protection that shields officers from lawsuits.
Qualified immunity is off the table. They see that as a poison pill.
But in Colorado, police have been living with a qualified immunity ban for more than a year now.
It starts right now.
In the weeks following the May 2020 death of George Floyd and the unrest that followed, Colorado's governor signed arguably the most sweeping statewide police reform bill in the country. SB 217 includes several popular reforms, like banning chokeholds, requiring body cameras, and tracking use of force incidents. But it also features more controversial measures, like a ban on qualified immunity. The qualified immunity ban allows citizens to bring individual lawsuits against Colorado police officers for alleged civil rights violations, but places a $25,000 cap on potential judgments against them. Brittany Gilliam filed the first lawsuit in the state since the qualified immunity ban took effect. A video of Gilliam and 4 young girls in her family being handcuffed and held at gunpoint went viral back in August. Aurora police believed Gilliam was driving a stolen car. She wasn't.
There is abundant case law standing for the proposition that you don't point loaded guns at small children if you're a cop. Very simple.
David Lane is a civil rights attorney in Colorado representing Gilliam's family.
So, hey, if the cop doesn't have the $25,000, oh, well, I guess they keep their job and we garnish their paychecks, till it's satisfied, just like any other person who gets sued and has to pay the bills.
Nationwide, proponents of qualified immunity say the long-standing legal doctrine is necessary to protect officers from frivolous lawsuits. But others say these protections have gone too far.
I think the reason why it has so much focus is because it's gotten a bit ridiculous in how it's applied.
Maureen McGough works for NYU's Policing Project, which advises law enforcement nationwide on reform efforts.
There's even a case where I think it was a prison guard pepper sprayed someone, but because the plaintiff was relying on a case where a prison guard tased someone for no reason in their cell, they found that it wasn't clearly established that pepper spraying someone who was locked in a cell for no reason was a violation of legislation or the Constitution. So, it's gotten a bit unwieldy.
In Colorado, many law enforcement leaders say some officers are quitting and specifically citing the qualified immunity ban as one of the reasons why. In a statewide survey of Colorado police chiefs and county sheriffs, 65% of officers who left law enforcement in the past year cited concerns about the new police reform bill as one of their top reasons for resigning. Bill Elder, sheriff in El Paso County, Colorado, said attrition rates in his department doubled since last year, and risks of civil litigation are among the top concerns.
There has not been some rash of frivolous lawsuits brought. In fact, the sky hasn't fallen at all.
Mari Newman is a civil rights attorney representing the family of Elijah McClain. McClain was killed by the Aurora Police Department in 2019.
If there are officers who don't want to continue to work in law enforcement because they'll be accountable for their actions, those are not officers we need.
Just this June, the Colorado legislature expanded its ban on qualified immunity to include highway patrol troopers and Colorado Bureau of Investigation officers. Jamal Andrus, Newsy.
Here to talk to us a bit more about qualified immunity and policing is Jamal Andrus. Jamal, first question for you. A lot of officers are quitting because of the qualified immunity ban. What does this say about law enforcement and law enforcement's willingness to be held accountable?
Well, I think there are a few things to consider here. One, it very much depends on the department, the state. If you look at Colorado alone, Denver actually did not see a decrease in their staffing after this bill, SB 217, became law. Meanwhile, in Aurora, where Elijah McClain was killed, that police department actually saw a 61% decrease or increase in people leaving the department, right? So depending upon where you are, that changes things quite a bit. Not only that, there was an expansion of this law just this past year that passed in June that essentially included the State Highway Patrol of Colorado into this ban on qualified immunity. And that organization didn't really fight this expansion at all. So they had no problem, at least publicly, becoming a part of this this situation with the qualified immunity ban in the state. So I think it very much depends. I would imagine that as we see this thing expand across the state, we'll hear from more people. Obviously, police unions are very much often on the other far end of the spectrum when it comes to these kinds of expansions and accountability. But it's not all police officers. It's not all, sheriff's deputies. Not everyone has a problem with this expansion of accountability in their job.
So in the time that this ban has been in place, what has the state learned about the ban and about how the ban affects policing?
The big issue with banning qualified immunity was this concern that there was going to be some rash of frivolous lawsuits, that all over the state you were going to see people who were upset about their interaction with the police force but didn't have legitimate claims filing these lawsuits. And that's just not something that we've seen so far. You know, as I mentioned in the piece, there are some officers who are leaving the force specifically citing this change in law. And so I think it varies from perspective, but one of the things that we've learned is that this big boogeyman that's supposed to sit on the other side of this ban of qualified immunity just doesn't seem to be there in this case.
So a lot of those fears, a lot of those concerns so far haven't quite seen that in Colorado.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, that's where we are right now. It's only been a year so far, so we'll have to see exactly where it goes from here. But as of right now, everything is sort of operating as normal.
One of the things that you've reported on a lot is the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. And we know that includes a ban on qualified immunity. What happens if this does not pass the Senate? What does the future of the ban look like on a statewide level?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that's making its way around the country, but very slowly. Something like a ban on chokeholds. That was something that the law enforcement community was largely in agreement upon, and it was something that we saw states and cities and counties adopt almost immediately after George Floyd's death. Qualified immunity has been very different. New Mexico was the second state to pass qualified immunity statewide. There's a big push in New York and Albany right now to push this thing through there, but so far hasn't happened yet. And for a lot of southern states that are Republican controlled, it's non-existent. When these negotiations first got going, Senator Tim Scott said that qualified immunity was a poison pill for this police reform bill. So it's not necessarily something that I expect to see across the country, but it is most certainly something that in these states that are either purple or blue, that they are most certainly having the discussion. But again, it is probably one of the most controversial of these police reform packages and police reform measures that we're seeing across the country.
Newsy's Jamal Andrus, thank you so much for your time, my man.
Of course.
When you're back, we'll tell you about a reunion that's been decades in the making.